All right, what's the next question? Next question is, I think, if you could have a superpower, what is it? What would it be?
Dude, invisibility.
Yeah.
I've never been diagnosed, but I know that I've got social anxiety to the nth degree.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help being this size and having every fucking random cunt come up to me and tell me I'm tall.
Yeah, wow.
So invisibility for me would be a dream.
It's crazy
that's really weird because one of the guests we had last week said the same thing, but he said it for a completely different reason. You're saying invisibility because you want to not be involved in things, and he said so that he could be involved in things and hear things and stand in the room.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah. That's hella interesting.
Yeah.
Imagine someone's about like what I'm imagining is someone's like, "Hey man, do you get no?" And you're just like gone, and they're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
And then what they don't know is that you're standing there, like, just like fucking breathing on them, dude. That'd be so
feel
good.
the air,
That'd be so good.
They just feel the air and they smell the bung bung bean. Like,
And then all of a sudden you just hear bung bung. Oh, dude.
No, people ask about that, like, why do you do stand-up comedy then? I'm like, well, that's not socializing. That's a one-way conversation, and then I disappear while you watch the next person. I'm in the back of the room, and it's just not even close to reality. It's not,
And I think that that's a very good example of what we don't understand about mental health. And obviously, you probably know we love talking about it a lot on this podcast, but for a lot of people would look at you objectively, right, and not think that that's something that you struggled with at all, right? When you look at has traveled, lived away from family, away from what is known as a safe place or somewhere where they would obviously feel more comfortable for a large portion of their life.
Yeah.
Played a sport that is, fucking social as fuck. You're constantly on this court surrounded by people, there's crowds. It's just, it's a somewhere where, again, you're not going to necessarily think that's someone who's anxious. Then you're doing podcasting, which again, not so much for you in doing your solo one, but you come out and do this and you're doing guests or whatever, which is obviously social, and then you're doing stand-up comedy. So to look at that objectively and to, I guess...
that's a man that needs validation.
But you
need to be clapped at all times. Just don't fucking speak to me.
But that's the thing, man. Like, a lot of people wouldn't look at that as the rap sheet or the stat sheet of someone who would be feeling like they would like to be able to disappear at any moment. And I guess that's probably, as I said, something that we don't understand really the depth of it. That there is no one size fits all for who struggles with it, because there'll be someone who couldn't possibly move away from home or live away from home, or couldn't possibly do stand-up comedy, or couldn't possibly start a podcast, but in a social setting they fucking thrive.
Yeah.
So it's like these kind of things that we would naturally attribute to someone who's not struggling. There's no fucking norm. There's no one size fits all. And I think that's a fucking perfect example of it, man. So have you found though that doing some of these things has helped in a way? Like, have you found that you've been able to build a confidence in yourself through doing stand-up and through doing a podcast and whatever that allows you to feel more comfortable?
I don't know, because it's the podcast is, I don't think the podcast really can, because it is just me in a room.
Yeah. It's almost more isolating. in a way,
even though hundreds of people listen, it's still just me.
Yeah.
And it's less intimidating than stand-up comedy, obviously, because people aren't looking at me. I don't have to hit punchlines or marks. I just go in and I talk just utter rubbish. So that hasn't helped. I think there's, like we were talking about the politics of comedy, like you have to talk to certain people to get gigs. So, I'm probably not making friends at a rapid pace in comedy. I've got a few people that I talk to, but like it's an affliction that people that don't suffer from it will never understand.
Yeah.
And my partner's one of them. We had a bit of disagreement on the weekend because of my behavior, because I was feeling a certain type of way in a social setting. And she just can't understand it. So I'm actually breaking it down on the podcast this weekend. So if anyone wants to listen to Welcome to the Potty. But like it is debilitating at times.
Yeah.
And because I know what's seen as normal, I try to be that from the start. But after about 10 minutes, it's drained me and I'm stuck. I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, you've got to be normal, you've got to figure this out. And while I'm having this internal dialogue, I'm not responding to what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people are like, what the fuck's wrong with this cunt?
Yeah.
And it just gets, so instead of actually getting better, I get worse because every time I'm in a social setting, I'm putting more pressure on myself to be normal.
And every second longer that you haven't figured it out for is then another second that your brain's going, you haven't figured it out yet. It's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. And then that just compounds.
Yeah.
So then 5 minutes into that time, you're in fucking complete shutdown mode.
Yeah.
And to try and bring yourself back from that is a near impossible task.
Yeah. And people that don't get it don't help. Like, I'm not trying to put my partner on blast. I love her. She loves me.
Of course.
She, with many occasions, she's said, "You've got like, what are you doing? Like, do you hate my friends? You got to do better." Blah blah blah.
And then that only makes the next time you go into one of those settings, already fucking anxious.
It's pressure. I'm already putting pressure on myself.
Yeah.
You're putting pressure on me. Plus, now I think that your friends think I'm weird. So now I'm saying now you need to make sure that they don't think you're weird. So it's just like this vicious cycle. And then like I had this interaction with a woman that I think is in the comedy world, maybe not from Adelaide. It was at Fringe last year before COVID hit the fan.
Yeah.
And like, we're looking at 12, 14 months later right now, and I still remember this clear as day, which is a problem. She, I guess, maybe thought she was giving me advice, but hasn't done me any favors. So she came up and spoke to me in the bar area of a comedy room. I think I was getting ready to do a gig or something. So I'm already sort of in my own zone trying to go over my shit in my head. And she comes over to me and talks, and I'm sort of coy or whatever, and I'm talking back a little bit. And I kind of just like stopped. I hit that point where I didn't know how to carry on.
Yep.
And she says, so she obviously had some sort of background because she recognized it. And she says, I don't care how much social anxiety you've got. You need to talk to people. You never know who you're speaking to.
Yeah, okay. She really put you on the spot.
Yeah, and so 14 months later, I'm sitting in this chair remembering this.
Yeah.
So that's still a pressure on me from over a year ago.
Yeah.
So that's not a helpful thing to do, regardless of. And I haven't seen this lady since. I still don't know who she is.
Yeah.
And it's like
stuck
it
with
affects
you.
me.
Yeah.
And that's where the just what you were saying about the partner stuff. And look, I understand this on a great level in reverse because I've been someone who has been on the other side of it. I've been the partner and I've not dealt with it as well in previous relationships, and I've grown a vast understanding of it through my failures or whatever in those times, and now feel like I manage it pretty well to the point that with a partner who struggles in all the same ways that you've just explained, and now I approach it completely differently. And that's the thing, is that the last thing that she needs or that you need in those settings is any additional pressure. You have to, as the person that's not suffering, that is trying to help them, you've got to try and remove as many of those fucking blocks or weights or whatever you want to call them as possible, and allow that person to go into that situation feeling as free as they possibly can, because that's the only chance that you've got of them being able to thrive in that. And, I've watched her have so many wins in the time that we've been together, because that's the thing, is that if you can go into a setting with not a lot of pressure and then things go well, you can start to, and we talk about this all the time, to build that thing up to carry into that next setting, right?
Yeah.
Because then when it goes well, you're like, well, because I wasn't so fucking already stressed before I went into it, I just kind of had a fucking casual time and I didn't overthink everything and I enjoyed myself. And then you're like, I can do that again. Yeah. You start to be able to believe in that ability, and then that can snowball into something greater. But it's so fucking hard if every time I was going to her, or like you said, I'm being like, can you be fucking normal tonight? That is the worst starting point that she can possibly have. But because before we've even opened the car door or got off the fucking Uber where we're going, that's already just imprinted in her brain that I'm expecting her to do something. And the idea of like making someone else feel like you're not a certain way, I don't care whether you suffer with anything. That's an impossible task because you have no fucking idea what their version of you they're looking for to make them feel better about how they feel about you. Is that not the most fucking retarded premise that anyone like?
That's I get the frustration, like, because if you love someone and you're comfortable with them and you let your guard down and you can be silly and funny and charming, 90% of the time, and then you're not, all of a sudden they're like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, exactly right.
But it's like, the reason I'm with you is because I feel free enough to be that way. And the reason I'm not with these people is because I don't.
Yeah, because you haven't developed that kind of like closeness with them.
Yeah, and it's like, and at home it's also just you and me. It's not 40 people.
Yeah.
And like, maybe no one in here gives a fuck about me, but it feels like it's all eyes on me, especially being this fucking big.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And I used to, like, as I said, in retrospect, I used to be quite, but like I used to have this weird thing where again, every time I'd go out to town, I thought I was going to get my head kicked in. And so there would only be certain times that I knew I felt comfortable because I had certain big mates with me that I felt like I could go out and I would be okay.
Yeah.
Or the same thing, I just felt like people were always, and I didn't even realize that was like a level of anxiety that I had as an 18-year-old until we started talking about it on the podcast and shit. And like I said, this whole thing or why we always focus on this is because just like we've said about, you would look at you objectively and probably not think that that's something that you're struggling with. Or like I've just said, not even realize that it was something I was suffering with at a certain point in my life. I thought it was just teen growing, you know what I mean? Just growing thing. You've never been out before, so that's why it's a little bit weird. No, I was actually fucking struggling with anxiety. I thought everyone was going to fucking want to kick my head in. Like, that's a weird thing to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just had no idea. Never talked about it, never tried to address it, never said a word to anyone, just fucking internalized the fuck out of it until, again, I went out enough and nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Or I was the person being a drunk dickhead and probably deserved to get my fucking head kicked in, that I was like, well, you can't really be worried about it when you're putting yourself in these situations, fuckhead.
Yeah.
And it slowly, dissipated over time and I built that confidence. But a lot of people don't even have an awareness that they're struggling with it.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, you're hyper aware of it and you've explained it really well. So then you think about someone who isn't aware that that's what they're struggling with, and then they've got that partner or family member or whatever putting pressure on them. Then
they just think that they're a weirdo,
And this is what we don't talk about so much, and we have probably never talked about this. You're talking about it as a 30-year-old adult and with your partner. But that exact thing that you've just described happens to 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 12-year-old. When we go to this fucking birthday party, don't be a fucking weirdo tonight. I have heard that from friends, parents, and whatever so much.
Yep.
It's in movies, it's in fucking whatever. Like that is such a normal thing for people to be having pressure put on them because they need to be a certain way because you're worried about people's opinions of your fucking daughter or son or whatever, or your partner. So you're already throwing all of that on them and then expecting them to just be able to rock up and perform the way and dance the fucking dance that you want them to when you go to this thing. That is what starts. That's where it starts as a kid, and then that manifests into something that you're now dealing with at 30 years old. It's fucking insane to think of that. So I hope that as a society, and the more that we have these conversations, that we can kind of fucking stop that a bit in its tracks and take those weight plates and that pressure off and just be like, look, go and just try and have a good time. Who gives a fuck what people are thinking? Who gives a fuck whether they're thinking you're this or thinking you're that? I know what you are. I know how amazing you are. And if you try your best to just enjoy yourself, I'm sure that everyone's going to feel the same. That's not going to work all the time. But if that's the advice you're being given before you're going into every social situation, you've got a hell of a more chance of fucking enjoying yourself than being like, don't be a fucking weird cunt tonight for once in your life.
Just be patient and say, like, hey, if you need to like come over to me at any time, just do it.
Yeah.
Because I also don't want someone fucking coming up to me and saying, are you all
Yeah,
You're like, I don't want that either.
Yeah.
Like if you can see it, if you can recognize it, come over, make a joke or something, like bring me out of it.
Yeah.
Distract me.
Yeah.
You know, like let's just come over and talk to me. I'm like, you know, as a partner, someone that is familiar, not all you random cunts that want to come and call me tall.
And call me tall.
But yeah, just come and distract me, come and tell me a joke, you know, but be patient. That's the main thing.
It's all patience.
Like,
really.
Well, that's another thing that I've said to, like, because it gets even deeper than that, where I remember my partner was like, well, I don't want to just be hanging off of you, like, and then I'm like, you do whatever the fuck you need to do.
Yeah.
Whatever's going to make you feel better. I'm like, wrap yourself fucking around me, like, show yourself. Whatever you got to do to help you, like, and I said, you know that I'm going to be fucking bouncing around from pillar to post because I'm the life of the party wherever we're going.
Yeah.
So fucking be in my shadow. I don't give a fuck. I'm never going to be like, oh my God, can you go over there?
Yeah.
Because imagine how that's going to fucking make her feel, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like,
how you're going to look.
Yeah. Being like, oh, do you fucking, wow, personal space.
Justin was treating his wife.
Yeah. But even like, you know, when we get home or whatever, I'm never going to be like, oh, did you fucking not find a friend the whole time we're there or something?
Yeah.
No, I'm like, no, you fucking be in my shadow as much as you need to and I'm going to talk about you or bring you into every conversation as much as possible because they're all important things.
Yeah.
Because if she's behind me and I don't mention her for fucking 4 hours of a party, well, then I'm a dick as well. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, they're like, oh, who's that? Oh, yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about her. Anyway, I'm a comedian, right? So listen to my podcast, right?